take, to gain a benefit that they wouldn't otherwise gain, to confer an advantage over one person over another. That's why we have lockups. That's why we have budget secrecy, so that everybody knows at the same time when a tax is changing, and they know in the year that it's going to change. But now, for this one time, this government has decided that they want to make a promise about a tax change that may possibly could have happened 2 years and 3 years from now. And the obvious question is why, and the obvious answer is because they did this before and they didn't keep their word, and now they want to find a way to show people that they mean it. But we also know that it's just a clause in a bill that will become law, like other clauses in previous bills that were made law by previous governments, like the balanced budget law that says the government can't run a deficit. It was a clause in a bill that became law. But when you elect a government and they get into office, everyone knows they can simply retract that law, as the NDP did in the case of the balanced budget law, so they could then run deficits. So this clause has no more value under this NDP government than that one did. That a majority vote, if they're ever re-elected and given a chance to fool us again, will result in the same outcome. But I'll get into that in more detail in just a moment, because I do want to spend a moment or two on the Liberal Party amendment that they tried to make to Clause 3 yesterday. We supported the amendment for the very obvious reason that Nova Scotians deserve as much protection as they can possibly get from another broken NDP promise. It was presented as an insurance policy against more NDP broken promises. I will point out that, like all insurance policies, it comes with a pretty heavy premium, because the premium in this case is the re-election of an NDP government, a premium that is too expensive for Nova Scotians to pay to have this kind of insurance in place. But at least the amendment was put to this House as an attempt to try and hold the NDP's feet to the fire if they were ever to try and break their promise again. The problem with the amendment, of course, Madam Speaker, is that, like any other clause in any other bill, it can be repealed by a majority vote of a re-elected government. And so, although Nova Scotians would pay the premium to have this insurance, they would have that insurance yanked away from them, like they did before with the balanced budget law, the minute that the NDP got back into office, if, God forbid, that were ever to actually happen. And for that reason, Madam Chair, although we supported it as a worthy attempt, it really didn't provide any more protection to the taxpayers than any other bill that has been put in place before the NDP got in did, because we know that they'll just use their power to repeal it in the first place. I will point out, as I did yesterday, that the Liberals exempted themselves from their own amendment to be free to do as they please when they get in. I was disappointed to see yesterday that when asked if they would cut the HST, they didn't have an answer to that question, even though we've been debating this for almost 3 years now. I do note that, kindly or otherwise, they actually also exempted the Progressive Conservatives from being bound by their same amendment. I just want to be clear, we have studied this, we know where we're going, we have told the people we will balance the budget and move on to reduce the HST back to 13% within the context of a balanced budget. That is one way where there is a difference between the Liberals and the Progressive Conservatives. Although we did support the amendment, we are very clear on where we will take the province when it comes to taxes. Now, I know that the Liberal Party had another amendment in Law Amendment Committee to insert into the Financial Measures Act that the government should do a comprehensive tax review. Well, Madam Chair, I just want to say that in our side of the House, we don't need a study to tell us what all Nova Scotians already know. They're paying the highest taxes in all of Canada. They are deserving of tax relief. That cutting taxes when there's a deficit is wrong, but when that deficit is cleaned up, the first action of a PC government will be to cut the HST back down to 13%. We don't need a study to tell us that. We don't need a fancy consultant to tell us that. The common sense view of Nova Scotians who are paying that crushing burden of HST already know it to be true. And so what Nova Scotians now know is they have an NDP government that puts goofy sham amendments into FMAs that they can't keep, a Liberal Party that even after all these years in opposition doesn't know what they want to do with taxes, and a PC party that knows exactly where it's going to go when it gets into government. Those are the three choices that Nova Scotians will have when the time comes. Madam Speaker, since there is no amendment to Clause 3, we are of course faced with dealing with Clause 3 as it was proposed originally by the government, with this sham provision that binds the Minister of Finance to take steps to lower the HST with so many asterisks after it and so many conditions that Nova Scotians will see right through it. And I just want to conclude my few remarks here today by saying that we see what the NDP is up to by trying to fool Nova Scotians once again. We know what the Liberals are up to, and by trying to amend a sham clause, we are not even convinced that amending a sham clause makes it any lesser of a sham clause, because they can still, no matter how it's amended, repeal it and go back on their word when they get back into office, if they ever do, like they did last time. And for that reason, I just want to make clear, we will not participate in a sham bill like this. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did want to speak briefly today to the FMA. I would like to note that the government did accept the amendment, slightly reworded, that I put in, that would have provincial pensions subject to garnishment for the maintenance enforcement program. We thought that was an important thing to add in there, because it's an area where we could actually get that in. It is an area that as members of this House will know that I have focused on a bit, but the government. I see the Minister of Finance, and I see how disappointed he is right now, and it hurts me to crush him like this. But I still have some concerns around this bill, and I felt that the amendments that the Liberal caucus put in were entirely reasonable. What we have heard time and time again from business is that we pay the highest taxes in the country. And what we would like to do is find out, is it better for us to reduce income tax, or is it better for us to reduce the HST? Are there other taxes that we could reduce that would make life better for Nova Scotians, make life better for Nova Scotian business? And to me, it's an entirely reasonable thing to ask that we don't just make promises, but that we actually have the intellectual foundation to make those promises. It's a good idea to actually know what is the best way to make life easier on our constituents. And instead, we have one group, well, we have two groups that say they're going to reduce the HST, but we haven't seen any evidence why that is better than doing any other thing. So I am concerned about that. And the government declined to accept that amendment. They also declined to accept our amendment, which would have seen an election called if they did not actually reduce the HST. As the leader of the third party pointed out, it really is sort of an insurance policy, and based on the government's past behavior, it's an entirely reasonable thing to do, because let's face it, promising something in an election campaign that you're pretty sure you can't deliver is a pretty cynical move. And a lot of Nova Scotians felt after the election that they've been had. And that's not the only thing they feel they've been had on. You know, I opened the Chronicle Herald today, and as we predicted last year, as this caucus rallied against last year, we are facing education cuts yet again. And it is incredibly frustrating for parents who see what's wrong in the education system now to know that it's going to be cut further and their kids will be in bigger classes and there will be fewer course offerings. We know this because HRSB finally came out and told us our budget, and I really do wish that HRSB had come out last year against the cuts as strongly as they're coming out this year, because maybe the government would have sat up and taken notice if HRSB had spoken up then. Maybe not, because they didn't pay any attention to any other school boards, but it sure would have helped if we could have had that kind of support from the beginning from the school board. But I can tell you the parents I'm talking to are extremely upset, and they say, we did not vote for this. This was not part of their election campaign. So it's yet another concern about what the NDP promised during the election and what has actually come to pass post-election. They promised they wouldn't raise taxes, and they did. And I would like to point out that it's only the leader of the official opposition who actually had the intestinal fortitude to say, no, we're not going to promise things if we can't deliver. And it may be nicer for a soundbite for the media if you say we're going to do X and Y, instead of saying, no, we want to find out what the situation actually is. And maybe it's easier to get elected that way, but the fact of the matter is it's disingenuous. And only our leader is the only one who stood up for that, for being clear about what he was promising. And I can tell you right now, the letters that are coming into my office, people are very upset because they feel that they were not told the truth. 24/7 emergency rooms. There was going to be some magic wand waved. That didn't happen. We don't have 24/7 emergency rooms. We're going to do away with the IEF. Boy, it's back and bigger than ever. And education, I can't say enough about that, because people, when you're a parent and your child is in a class and that class is not going well, and I can tell you, because I've had kids in classes with over 30 kids before, it's not a good place for the kids, and the parents know it. And the parents who have the money go and get some extra tutoring for their kids, and they can make up for that. But the parents who don't have the extra money, or who don't even realize what's going on, they can't. And that makes life very difficult for Nova Scotian families. So I just want to, again, thank the government for accepting the one amendment that we put in, but it really is sort of a hollow victory when in fact they didn't accept two other ones which made eminent sense and would have offered more protection for Nova Scotians. Thank you.
Thank you. The question is for third reading of Bill number 17, the Financial Measures Act. Is the House ready for the question? There's been a call for a recorded vote. We'll now ring the bells until the whips are satisfied. Order, please. The question is for third reading of Bill number 17, the Financial Measures Act. There has been a request for a recorded vote. Are the whips satisfied? I'd ask the clerk to proceed with the recorded vote.
Go ahead. Okay. Mr. Landry.
Yes.
Ms. Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Estabrooks.
Aye.
Ms. Peterson-Rayfuse.
Yes.
Mr. Corbett.
Yes.
Mr. Dexter. Absent. Mr. Steele.
Yes.
Ms. McDonald.
Yes.
Mr. Paris. Ms. Jennings.
Yes.
Mr. McDonnell. Mr. Bellevaux.
Yes.
Mr. Pereira.
Yes.
Ms. Zan.
Yes.
Ms. Conrad.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes.
Mr. Parker.
Yes.
Mr. McKinnon.
Yes.
Ms. Raymond.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Epstein. Mr. Prest. Mr. Ramey.
Yes.
Mr. Skabar.
Yes.
Mr. Wynot.
Yes.
Mr. Morton.
Yes.
Ms. Birdsall.
Yes.
Mr. Boudreau.
Yes.
Mr. Burrell.
Yes.
Mr. Manning MacDonald. Mr. Gaudette.
No.
Mr. Glavine.
No.
Ms. Whalen.
No.
Mr. McNeil. Mr. Samson.
No.
Mr. D'Entremont. Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bain. Mr. Porter. Mr. McMaster. Mr. McLeod. Mr. Orell. Mr. Younger. Oh. Ms. Regan.
What are we voting? No.
No? Ms. Casey.
No.
Did I hear her? Ms. Casey?
Ms. Casey, can you repeat it, please? We
Mr.
didn't hear you.
Caldwell?
No. No.
Mr. Zink?
No.
Mr. Theriault? Mr. McClellan?
No.
Mr. Churchill.
No.
The results of the vote are in favor 24, against 10. The motion is passed.
The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Richmond. Thank you. Recognize the clerk.
Bill number 17, an act respecting certain financial measures.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Order that the bill be engrossed. Recognize the honourable member for Richmond, or the House Leader for the official opposition.
It's close enough.
Close enough.
Madam Speaker, I just want to say on a point of order that we all know that the vote on the Financial Measures Act, a recorded vote, was requested by the Conservative caucus under the leadership of the leader of their caucus, and I believe that they're not even showing up for that vote. It's certainly a signature of what leadership we could expect from the Conservative caucus after that. So
I'd rule that that's not a... Order, please. I would rule that that is not a point of order. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Okay, where were we, Kelly? Madam Speaker, Madam... Oh, it's not me?
Order, please. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I move third reading of Bill number 30, Promotion of Respectful and Responsible Relationships Act.
Now call Bill number 30, Promotion of Respectful and Responsible Relations Act, and I would recognize the Honourable Minister of Education to move third reading.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I move that Bill 30 be read a third time. This bill, an act to address bullying by promoting respectful and responsible relationships, sets the stage for a comprehensive plan to work with our partners as we address the recommendations of the Nova Scotia Task Force on Bullying and Cyberbullying. Madam Speaker, I've said that bullying and cyberbullying are societal problems that we must face together. We know that they are very real issues that affect many people. We are wrestling with this not just here in Nova Scotia, but throughout North America and indeed many parts of the world. I appreciate this as a sensitive issue that often hits close to home. And I want to thank all those who took the time to speak on this bill at the Law Amendments Committee. And I know that they spoke from the heart. To that point, Madam Speaker, I want to stress that this legislation is only the beginning of our action plan. I know there are some who feel we are not going far enough right now, but these amendments give us a framework to take a measured, focused approach to tackle this problem. We will certainly consider some of the suggestions made in law amendments, Madam Speaker, but as we go forward, I must believe it is important to bear in mind that bullying is ingrained in our culture and will require a cultural shift to change. As we know, these issues extend far beyond the classroom or the schoolyard. We can't simply legislate them away any more than we can stop them solely by confiscating cell phones or handing out punishments. We are amending the Education Act to focus on a restorative, proactive approach as supported by Professor Wayne McKay and the task force. We appreciate all the work Professor McKay did in leading the task force and working group, and we continue to work towards many of the other recommendations as we move forward with our action plan. The task force report stressed that knowing the scope and prevalence of the problem is critical as we develop appropriate strategies. In fact, the first 6 recommendations in the report all focused on collecting better information about bullying. Madam Speaker, this legislation will help do just that. It requires school boards to collect, monitor, and report data on severely disruptive behavior, including bullying and cyberbullying. This legislation also updates the Education Act to address student behavior and discipline in more current language and to reflect our direction in promoting a school-wide approach to creating positive school environments. Madam Speaker, I should point out that we already have policies such as the Provincial School Code of Conduct to address behavior issues and promote restorative actions. We are building on a foundation that is already in place. The amendments provide authority to define bullying and cyberbullying to make sure we have a consistent definition in all of our policies and regulations. As I have said previously, we are adopting the definition the task force carefully drafted. In short, Madam Speaker, we are beginning our work by clearly defining bullying and cyberbullying and working to gauge their scope in our schools. We are also appointing an anti-bullying coordinator to spearhead a strategic, collaborative action plan. These are just the first steps, Madam Speaker, but I want to stress they are very important first steps that should not be taken lightly. Bullying is not a new problem, but it has taken on a new and very complex dimension in our rapidly evolving technology. These are tough issues here with a clear, and these are tough issues here, and we need to have clear solutions. We want to be focused and strategic. We don't want to rush or be reactive. For example, one suggestion at law amendments was to give police the power to access internet usage information without obtaining a warrant. As we know, Madam Speaker, online privacy is a hotly debated issue with a whole host of ethical questions. It is certainly beyond the scope of the Education Act. But what we do, Madam Speaker, what we will do, Madam Speaker, is to invite internet service providers to participate on the task force working group. And we will continue to include providers in the discussion as we go forward with this action plan. We are also directing school boards through policy to support student requests to establish groups such as gay, straight alliances and cultural diversity groups. The task force report showed that students who identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgendered are major targets of bullying, and we want to be deliberate in making our schools safer places for those students. We provided an opportunity for 3 staff to attend a conference on suicide education, and we have given materials on suicide prevention called Coping and Support Training, or CAST, to every school in this province. We will also engage with other jurisdictions on best practices, Madam Speaker. I know Ontario continues to work on its own anti-bullying legislation, and we will be following that closely. This summer, I will host my fellow education ministers from across Canada here in Nova Scotia, in July actually, and I have made sure that a conversation on dealing with bullying is on the agenda. Madam Speaker, we are enlisting students to help with a public awareness campaign, and we will be launching that shortly. We know student voices are our best asset in tackling a problem that affects them directly. And Madam Speaker, we will be working across government on this, not just in the Education Department, but with health and wellness, community services, and justice, among others. By the fall, we will be unveiling some of our next actions, which will include not just legislation, but proactive approaches that will directly impact the classroom. Madam Speaker, we are working to address bullying and cyberbullying in our communities. Some of that work is already underway and some is still to come. We want to do this right. We don't believe that reacting in the moment or creating penalties for children and parents without thinking through the implications is the best way to produce long-term results. Instead, we are taking a strategic, collaborative, well-thought-out approach that is designed to promote respect and change the way our youth think about bullying and cyberbullying. We are well aware that this is not an easy task and we will not have overnight results. However, Madam Speaker, it is the only way to produce real change in us all working together. And it begins here with this legislation that we are considering today. Madam Speaker, I want to thank my staff for their ongoing work on this important topic, and once again, I want to thank the task force and working group along with the many Nova Scotians who have provided input. I look forward to having these amendments in place to allow us to get to work on tackling bullying and cyberbullying in our schools and communities. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like to thank the Minister for her comments. I stated in the House previously that I appreciated seeing a piece of legislation come forward that addressed what we all know to be a very serious problem, and that was intended to be addressed through Bill number 30. I was also pleased to hear a member opposite speaking yesterday about the importance of us working together to try to address the problem. And I think it's fair to say that every member in this legislature acknowledges that there is a problem, a social problem. They also acknowledge that it is our responsibility as legislators to put forth legislation designed to address that. And it's also, I believe, our responsibility to make sure that we do work in the best interest of the students and the kids in our province. And so there's no question that there is a problem, there's a social problem, there's no question that we need legislation, there's no question that the legislation comes through this House, and there's no question that we need a sense of cooperation. And so in the spirit of cooperation, when Bill number 30 went before law amendments, we did have some very experts in the field who were not members of the legislature who came forward to express their concern. And not only did they express their concern with what was not in Bill 30, they went so far as to offer suggestions as to how that bill could be strengthened. We had Dr. Wayne McKay, and we all recognize his expertise. We all value his opinion. It was certainly an asset to the task force to have Dr. Wayne McKay agree to be the chair of that. And his comments at law amendments, his comments to the media prior to, I guess at the time that the task force report was submitted and then at the time the legislation was introduced, his comments were that he was disappointed. And when we have someone with the expertise that Dr. McKay has, who has agreed to lead the task force and who has given 9 months dedicated to that, to say he's disappointed, I think it behooves the minister to pay attention to that message. We also had at law amendments another member of the task force and also a member of the police force who again reiterated that the bill was a disappointment, it did not go far enough, and it was certainly not addressing many of the 85 recommendations that had been put forth in that task force report. Pretty hard to ignore comments that come from somebody who is on the front line in dealing with cyberbullying in the community and also participant in the task force. The third presenter, Madam Speaker, was the mother of a child who had been the victim of cyberbullying and unfortunately chose to take her own life because of that. And I commend that mother for being able to come before a legislative committee and to come before us filled with sadness, filled with frustration, and also filled with anger. And she was able to articulate to those of us on the committee her feelings, but also her disappointment again, that the legislation, in her mind, was not designed to prevent another Jenna. And she has made it a mission of hers to get into schools to try to do what she can to help educate our young people. She was very instrumental in the Kids Walk in Truro last weekend, a weekend ago. And she is holding her head up high in the midst of her grief to try to help others. When we as a legislative committee, or we as members of this legislature, hear those concerns and those frustrations and those recommendations, they're not coming from members of a political party. And I think we need to get beyond that. They're coming from people in the community who are directly impacted, and in her case, negatively, by what's happening with cyberbullying. We also heard at law amendments that were submitted by the Liberal caucus, which we believed would strengthen the bill. No one has ever said that the bill has to be complete in its initial stages. No one has ever said that the amendments that have been presented will make it complete. But what we have said is, as it now stands, what happens in the schools in our province tomorrow will not change as a result of this legislation. And that's exactly what people are asking for. People are asking for short-term and long-term. We know that data collection is important, and the minister has said, and I think as I went through my list the other day, there were 6 recommendations out of 85 that talked about data collection. Nobody is underestimating the importance of data collection, but the task force would be the first to tell you that the data collection that we currently have tells us that we have a major problem in our schools, and collecting the data from now until the end of next year is good information to have, but it does nothing right now to address the problem. And so what we were proposing in our amendments was that there would be some teeth put into this. There would be something that would allow school principals, classroom teachers, school boards to put in place some definitions of identifying inappropriate behavior, identifying cyberbullying, and some consequences, and making sure that every student in our school understood what behavior was not acceptable and what the consequences were for that. That did not happen. That is not in this legislation. The second thing that we put forward, or another amendment that we put forward, had to do with notifying internet and cell phone providers. And, you know, the minister spoke about the importance of doing that. Well, there was a member there on the task force who represented internet and cell service providers. So the expertise was there. The expertise was there, and it was incorporated into recommendations. What we were saying, we have no jurisdiction in education to tell Bell Alliant or to tell a service provider what they do with their accounts. But we do have a responsibility if we know that there are people in our schools who have been found to be using the internet or the cell phone to bully or cyberbully, then we have a responsibility to make sure that the service providers know that. It's their responsibility then to address that. That was in the amendment. That's not in the bill. We also know that in the long term, and this came directly from the task force member who was a member of the police force, we also know that police are saying their hands are tied in many cases. And that's because we need to have something in the criminal code that addresses cyberbullying. One of the amendments that we put forward from the Liberal caucus was that negotiations, conversations, dialogue would begin immediately between the province and the federal government to deal with changes to the criminal code. That was not in Bill 30. So, Madam Speaker, we know that there are a number of things that can happen immediately, and collecting data and going to talk to somebody at a conference about what's happening across other jurisdictions is not anything related to action, current action to address the current problem. The research that was done by the task force, directed by Dr. Wayne McKay, looked at jurisdictions across the province. That research has been done. We do not need to recreate this. We know what we have, we know we have a problem, and we know that with Bill 30, it's not going to get any better. Thank you.
Thank Thank you. There's been a request for an introduction. I recognize the honourable member for Hammonds Plains, Upper Sackville.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, in the East Gallery, we have some folks from Ontario visiting us. We have Gay Martel, Heather Fawcett, David Lapp, Ken Fawcett, and Marie Thompson. And also we have Shelley Martel, who's a former member of the Provincial Parliament in Northern Ontario, and she is the partner of former NDP leader and former MPP Howard Hampton. So I'd ask them to please rise and receive the warm welcome of the House, and welcome to Nova Scotia.
Welcome all of our guests to today's proceedings. I hope you enjoy your day. I recognize the honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to speak for a few moments on this bill. Cyber, quite honestly, the short title should be cyberbullying or bullying in our schools. We have had a chance to participate in a number of the processes here in the legislature, and we've all had the opportunity to speak about bullying, cyberbullying, what we think of electronic mediums, of Facebook, of texting, of all these things that, of course, lead to an opportunity for those who bully to bully. And, Madam Speaker, the issue that we're really trying to address, I think this bill provides a good start. We in the opposition feel that there's a number of things that this bill could have done in adopting the recommendations from the bullying task force that were, of course, were not accepted. And I know the minister is working hard to work with her colleagues, whether the Minister of Justice, whether the federal government for criminal code issues, or all those things that I think will create a better picture or package when it comes to trying to stop this scourge of bullying / cyberbullying. The challenge that we saw when we provided our amendments and law amendments were to try to provide a little more direction for the setting of regulations, not to leave everything to regulation, because Madam Speaker, what happens is that regulations seem to take an awful long time to put together. There's a lot of hands that end up being a part of it, and sometimes the original intent of certain recommendations might be lost. And what we were hoping through law amendments process, that we would take that opportunity, strengthen the document, so that when the regulation issue started to happen and the debate started to happen, not on the on the floor of this legislature, but of course in the offices of the Department of Education, that we would have a better feeling that the things would be done more correctly and more to the spirit of the recommendations by that cyberbullying task force. This, by far, is not all the recommendations that, of course, the task force brought us. We would like to have seen more of those recommendations incorporated here. We also would like to have seen, if not in this bill, maybe the Minister of Justice could have come with a bill as well to provide a little more of that issue that we heard about in law amendments, was giving a few tools to the police departments to truly investigate and give them some powers to try to stop the cyberbullying the way it's headed. Because we know this cyberbullying does not just happen during school hours. This happens, of course, after school hours, where that line becomes gray between if it's an education issue or if it is a broader criminal issue. We talked, of course, in our bill, and we talked about one of the bills that we do have here, which is the issue of trying to find more restorative justice methods to sort of bring these bulliers to light, to try to provide them with information, to try to get them to stop, and if that doesn't happen, then to try to hold them accountable and or their families accountable, because this cannot continue to happen. And Madam Speaker, I know the member for Colchester North who just spoke talked about the visitors that we did have to law amendments. And I mean, I've been here for 9 years. I've been in the halls of the legislature for 12. And that was probably one of the hardest law amendments that I was that I had ever participated in. To hear the heartfelt sorrow about this issue when Pam Murchison came and spoke about her daughter. Made it extremely difficult, but it also, I think, when our hearts open up, that we sometimes can find ways to maybe strengthen or work together to make these bills more appropriate to Nova Scotia. Madam Speaker, what happened was upsetting to me, that the recommendations that were presented by the opposition parties were not accepted. Even though there was a spirit, and I know the member for Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island, has on many occasions said, you know, the recommendations that you provide, the amendments you provide are, of course, in the spirit of what our regulation will look like. But I feel, our party feels that that's just not good enough. We had a great opportunity here to make this an even better bill, and that was ignored by government in this particular case. So, Madam Speaker, all I can say as I conclude, that I hope that not all is lost, that, of course, the recommendations that we did provide will be seriously considered when this happens, when that process does get up and running, that, of course, will be taking some time. I hope that the minister will provide us with some updates of where it is in process, so that we know that children across Nova Scotia will be protected by this legislation, to be protected from the bulliers that seem to be all over the internet and, of course, in places where we probably don't expect them to be in the future. So with that, Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to speak to this bill.
Thank you. The question is for third reading of Bill number 30, Promotion of Respectful and Responsible Relationships Act. Is the House ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 30, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act, to address bullying by promoting respectful and responsible relationships.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. I now recognize the Acting Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I do now ask you to call Bill number 52, Conservation Easements Act.
Now call Bill number 52, the Conservation Easements Act. The question has been called for third reading of Bill number 52. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 52, an act to amend Chapter 28 of the Acts of 2001, the Conservation Easement Act.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. Recognize the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Could you please now call Bill number 55, the Community Easements Act?
Call Bill number 55, the Community Easements Act. The question has been called for third reading of Bill number 55. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 55, an act respecting community easements.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. Recognize the Acting Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Can you please now call Bill number 65, the Consumer Protection Act?
I call Bill number 65, the Consumer Protection Act. Question has been called for third reading of Bill number 65. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 65, an act to amend Chapter 92 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Consumer Protection Act, to ensure fairness in cellular telephone contracts.
Order that the bill do pass. Order that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. Recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, could you please call Bill 78, the Justice Administration Act?
I call Bill number 78, the Justice Administration Act. The question has been called for third reading of Bill number 78. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 78, an act respecting the administration of justice.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please call Bill number 79, the Education Act.
Call Bill number 79, the Education Act.
For third reading.
Question is for third reading of Bill number 79. Is the House ready for the question? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill number 79, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1995-96, the Education Act.
Ordered that the bill do pass. Ordered that the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, that concludes the government's business for today and the week, and I wish that we now rise to meet at the hour of 4 to 10 p.m. on Monday, and after the daily routine, we will do address and reply and any other business that may befall us, Madam Speaker. And you know what, Madam Speaker? To all, a happy Mother's Day. Have a great weekend.
Isn't it sweet? Thank you. The motion is that we do now rise to meet again Monday, May the 14th, between the hours of 4 and 10 p.m. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried.